Okay, Anita Spring, she's saying to you, Stanley, I enjoyed your poetry reading of Achebe's poetry. I used so many of his books in my classes, but did not include his poetry.
Okay, what I didn't read Achebe's poetry. I have read his poetry. I didn't know he had poetry, but he's a poet also, and I read his poetry. But for this particular event, I read an excerpt from James Baldwin's only published book of poems. I think it's called Jimmy's Blues, and I read one of his poems. I think the title of his poem is "Becoming 40" or "Becoming 50," something like that. Can't remember the title, but I only read my own work, and one of Baldwin's poems. So the rest of the work that I read poetry was my work.
Okay. There's Terry Bailey who says to you, hard act to follow. Well, I hope we can try to follow through and make it.
Terry is a local sister who's very supportive, and she's very active in the community, and also in the she's a fellow poet also, sister poet. Yes, I love Terry, and she's a wonderful sister. Thank you, Terry.
Okay, Chilo, do you know anything about Achebe's poetry that you?
Yeah, I'm actually an expert in Achebe's poetry, and I don't know. Of course, Achebe has written a few poems here, but I'm more interested in his prose, in his novels, and in his essays. So that is my area of expertise. Actually, to be straight to the point, I don't rate Achebe's poetry as effectively as or as powerfully as I rate his novels and his essay.
Okay, and continuing on with you, Dr. Essay. You wanted me to call you Cello, but I will. But you are a doctor. Since you have also a background in theology, how would you discuss things fall apart in Christianity and traditional religion?
Yeah, things fall apart. Of course, perhaps if one wants to engage Achebe's discussion of Igbo or African traditional religion, I think the better novel to do it is The Arrow of God. That is where he discusses so Ezul is the chief priest who embodies the contrast or the collision between Western religion and African religion. There are also elements of it in Things Fall Apart, but the experts in Things Fall Apart will agree with me that it's more focused on the political consequences of the meeting of these two cultures or these two peoples, the West and Africa.
Okay, Kole Odutola, I know him as Kole, he's a professor here. He's saying that Achebe was also a well-published poet. His poetry collections include collected poems 2002, Another Africa, 1997, and Christmas in Biafra, and other poems, 1973. He was awarded the Commonwealth Poetry Prize in 1972 for his first collection, Beware, So Brother, and other poems. Now, any comment on that? Since Cole brought this up, and both of you are poets. I know in your background, and especially you Stanley, you are an activist poet. How would you, how do you see James Baldwin's poetry as complement to activism?
I think his not as much as his, just like Eze, Dr. Eze,
yes.
Thing about Achebe, his poetry was not as powerful as his prose, and I think the same thing goes for James Baldwin. I think he only published, I think his book of poetry is the only book of his that went out of print. So I searched for it. I'm always searching for poets. So when I knew about I was going to be on this panel, and I searched out for Achebe's poems. But I would think his just like Achebe, Baldwin's prose is much more powerful than his poetry. I'm a poet because everything I start to write, it may start out as a short story or something, but it ends up a series of poems. Everything turns into poem for me. So I can't. That's just how it is. So.
You're also a hip hop artist too.
No, I'm not a hip hop artist. No. I have a son.
You're an author of hip hop.
I'm an author of a book called Hip Hop is Dead, Long Live Hip Hop, The Birth, Death, and Resurrection of Hip Hop Activism.
Okay, that's why.
That's the book. I'm not a hip hop artist. I'm more of a critic of commercial hip hop and what happens to what we create, what indigenous Black and brown people create organically. What happens to that in a colonial environment? So that was kind of like what I talked about when we were talking about the excerpt from Baldwin's and Achebe's meeting. Achebe talked about literature as being people's attempt at rediscovering themselves or reshaping themselves again after they've been shaped by colonial forces. And one of the colonial forces I focus on is right now it's pretty much mass media, imagery, music, the conglomerate mass media industry, images that we see, the things that we hear, we consume, we take in. One of those things is music. And I think there's an African proverb, and you can, there are a lot of things that people call African proverbs, but may not be actual African proverbs. But I heard that this is an African proverb, and it's in my book, that there is no magic more powerful than music. And the effects of music and have on our youth. When you go into these urban areas, when hip hop was created by as a voice for the marginalized and the oppressed. And what happens to that art form, whatever art form that we create in a colonial environment, I contend that it's not sought out to be destroyed, but rather it's sought out to be fixed in a colonial form. And that art form, right now we're talking about hip hop and music, that art form is taken and the elements of it, but now once it's been fixed in a colonial form, it no longer testifies for the organic community that organically created it. Now it testifies against them because it's more like a synthetic Frankenstein monster that they created in a lab. That's why you hear the lyrics that you hear. What's this music saying?
Thank you.
Forces that shape us.
Okay. Oh, wow. This is the reaction to the hip hop is just jumping all over the place. But I want to also, Chielo, Do you have anything to add? Because I know, I know your university in Chicago, they have a lot of, it's a community. It's dealing with the community. So do they, are there classes that study or produce scholarship on music and things like that? And plus you're in Chicago, so the heart of jazz and blues.
Yeah, my university, as we both of us discussed just before we went live. So we have experts in activism, and part of that activism is organizing hip hop festivals or hip hop or poetry. So that's the much we do. And we don't organize, we don't teach hip hop except perhaps in seminars here and there. We don't teach hip hop poetry or artistry. We just organize to make certain issues aware in society, to make people aware of certain issues in society. My university is very good at that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to take another. You probably know this person, Ronald Ewalt. Stanley.
No.
No. Okay. Here's what this is his.
I don't think so. Forgive me.
Okay. His first reaction is, I look forward to reading your book, Hip Hop is Dead, Long Live Hip Hop, while your poems celebrate the African American experience through the art form of hip hop. Is it not? It's not also amazing how this form of music has become so universal to the world and so many cultures. Now, then he writes, P.S. My son has been a hip hop artist for 25 years. Then his third thing, Ronald, you are. Hip-hop has become a powerful tool in the preservation of languages from smaller societies that might otherwise be lost. Now, I want to just add, that's true across the border. In Africa, in black and brown areas of France, Germany, and in Japan, all these countries.
Yes, I was just on a panel last week and dealing with some issues in Palestine, and they were playing Tupac and some Palestinian hip hop that I couldn't understand. I didn't understand it, but it sounded amazing. But one of the things, so hip hop is global. Hip hop is global, and one of the things that concerns me is we don't control these large media outlets, what gets out there. So hip hop kind of can serve as a representative for Black culture. Who is defining exactly what Black culture is? A lot of what they're defining with these corporate media outlets who distribute these images and this music, they select a certain type of song or a certain kind of artist, and they suppress other forms of the same art form. They don't want you rapping about revolution and Black power and Pan-Africanism. They want you rapping about other kinds of stuff, maybe sex or drugs or that kind of thing. Every now and then you'll see some, but you have to go looking for it. If you tune into any mainstream urban hip hop station, even right here in Gainesville, you will hear exactly. Just listen to what's in rotation, and it's not testifying for our community. And so these type of artists are serving as representatives for the Black community all over the world, and a lot of what they're representing, I think is not a good thing. So if you have never met a Black person and never know anything about Black culture, and only thing you know is through an image or a hip hop song, that can be a problem.
Okay. Okay. Do you have anything to add to that, Cello?
I'm not an expert in hip hop, and so
but music, no.
Music in general, but not as form of poetry. Well, of course, one could say music is also a form of poetry. And so I listen to lots of music, and Nigerian
Okay, that's what I'm going for.
music is a form of I wouldn't say it's hip hop, but it's also a means of communicating people's lives. I think of Fela, who is a national and a global treasure. So when you listen to his music, well, perhaps one could see it as a form of hip hop art. Now, it's also a form of poetry. So, growing up in the 80s, whenever we heard any of Fela's song, we started nodding and then singing. But we didn't know. Many of us didn't know that he was basically doing poetry in politics, of course. So that's how it's. But the American hip hop, I'm not so much into it. So of course you mentioned Stanley. You mentioned Tupac. Yeah, I love Tupac. So Tupac is basically a global icon.
I'm a funk guy myself. I grew up on funk. Just all kinds of funk. Just during the 70s. And that kind of thing. So that's what I grew up on right now. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter the art form. The same thing happened to hip hop and other art forms. Whatever we create happened to jazz. You had these artists that started experimenting, and just like the white people named that jazz. A lot of artists rejected that particular label of that name, but you had these artists who started experimenting with these different sounds. Arnett Coleman, Coltrane, and these people, that's why they went to Europe, because they couldn't make a living here. But one of the things that happened with jazz, they started experimenting with free jazz, and the powers that be, the same power that seemed to shape us, that Achebe was talking about, the powers that be thought that if they let promoted this music, it would cause black youth to start to think critically. This music was so powerful. It wasn't just instruments, but it made you sit there and think. And they thought that you listen to this stuff, it will cause you to start to critically think. So they suppressed it. Just like they suppress other forms of music today in hip hop. Like Terry Bailey asked a question, I think, about underground hip hop artists whose names we don't hear. That's exactly right. You have to go looking for this stuff. That's why you won't hear it over the regular commercial radio station that's controlled by Europeans.
Yeah, it would have been great to know what James Baldwin will say about hip hop, but I know what he wrote about the blues, and I think he said that it expresses the African American spirit, the undying spirit of resistance and persistence, and the refusal to be erased. So, and that is in his assessment of the blues. That is what the blues actually signifies. So I'm more into the blues, R&B than into hip hop. And reading James Baldwin's take on the blues, so actually it blew my mind. It gave me people
right now.
It gave me an inroad into the African American philosophy, into the African American history, into what it means to be black in America. So
yes. So there are some people right now who think that white people cannot sing the blues. I mean, they may stay there singing the blues, but they cannot sing the blues. So there's a debate going on in some circles about that very thing, about blues being exclusively a black experience.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. There's the director of the African American Studies program here at UF. He's asking a question. His name is Dr. David Canton. Why is Tupac a global icon and not Rakim? While Tupac was political, he also had songs that were commercial success, but Rakim was a better lyricist than Tupac.
Dr. Canton, I mean, maybe Dr. Eze, you can answer that since you are a hip hop expert.
You are, Stanley.
I'm no hip hop expert. I mean, what drew me to because I didn't listen to a whole lot of rap, but I listened to Tupac. I think and there's a thing that hooks young minds just like mine when I was younger. I like the groove. I love the flow, the music that West Coast type of flow. I think I really got into that West Coast when I think the album came out, The Chronic, and it just reminded me. Like I said, I grew up on funk, so a lot of what I gravitate to is, I went to my first. I'm not answering Dr. Canton's question, but my first hip hop concert at University of Florida. It was Run DMC, and when I got there, I was looking for like this band because I grew up on Earth, Wind, and Fire. I mean, they had an orchestra, a band. So I'm looking for a band, and I see these two guys with just turntables, and I'm like, what is this? So I think for me, I'm gonna ask you a question.
I think if I can add to that, there's something.
We have 1 minute.
There's something bluesy in Tupac's music. So each time I mention Tupac in my class, students, black, white, brown, they refer to one of his poems that talks about a rose that sprang up in war crack, in cracks of war. So that the bluesy part of it is the refusal to give up, the refusal to be defeated by the powers that be. And I think that is what connects Tupac to to history. And of course, we remember that his mother was a well-known political activist.
Right.
So that situated him in history, in the history of African American, of black Christians. So he's there. His lyrics are great, and his music has historical and political and poetic relevance.
That's what I was thinking. One connection to the Panther, to the Black Panther Party.
Right.
I think it has something to do with it also.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I think she's gonna cut us because we've taken up our 1 minute. But I really enjoyed moderating this. You come from two different areas, and I never met you, Stanley, and I'm in Florida, I'm in Gainesville, but I'm a professor who only hangs out now at home, but I'm just in my office. But I really enjoy you guys. And I'm happy I had this breaking of bread.
It was a pleasure. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I wish we had more time.
Yeah, we should have had more time.
And thank you for everybody who posed questions. Thank you for tuning in. Really appreciate it.
And thank you to the Center for African Studies. I got to do my thing.
Hip hop is dead. Long live hip hop. The birth, death, and resurrection of hip hop activism.
Okay. Yeah, let's let him go.
Yeah.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.